The morning sun spilled softly through the blinds, casting pale strips of light across the bedroom floor. Laura lay awake long before the alarm, staring at the ceiling. Today was Daniel's 40th birthday. She had imagined this day for weeks. Quiet, intimate, a family dinner with their daughter, and maybe a glass of wine shared late into the night. Yet, beneath her calm planning, unease gnawed at her chest, the kind of hollow restlessness she couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. Daniel stirred beside her. He stretched, yawned, then rolled out of bed without the cheerful grin Laura expected. Instead, his face was shadowed, his movements brisk, almost hurried. He muttered something about needing to check emails, though it was barely 7 in the morning. Laura watched him, the silence between them louder than words. At the kitchen counter, Daniel's phone buzzed. He snatched it quickly, turning his back to her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Yeah, I'll call you later. Not now. Please, just wait." His shoulders tightened as he listened. A pause, then a forced chuckle. "I know. I'll handle it." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, but Laura had seen enough. His hands shook slightly as he poured coffee, spilling a few drops on the counter. She spoke carefully, masking the suspicion that burned at the edges of her words. "Big plans for today?" Daniel forced a smile. Work never stops, even on birthdays. But his tone betrayed him. It was too light, too rehearsed, the way he spoke when covering something up. Laura turned back to the stove, her fingers tightening around the spatula. She told herself it was nothing. Just stress. Maybe a deadline. Still, she felt that whisper of doubt coil deeper. By mid-morning, the house hummed with ordinary life. Emma, their 16-year-old daughter, bounded down the stairs with a card she had made by hand Dania. Elle accepted it with exaggerated delight, kissing her forehead and hugging her tight. For a moment, the tension melted, replaced by the warmth of fatherhood. Laura stood in the doorway watching. She wanted to believe in this picture, the devoted husband, the loving father. But in the corner of her mind, that phone call still echoed. "Tonight will be special," she reminded herself. She had planned Daniel's favorite meal, steak, roasted potatoes, and a chocolate cake cooling on the counter. She would make sure the evening went perfectly. Maybe then the strange shadows of the morning would fade. As afternoon crept in, Daniel grew restless. He wandered from room to room, checked his phone every few minutes, and kept stepping outside under the pretense of fresh air. Laura noticed the way his eyes darted, the way he forced small talk as if covering a noise only he could hear. Finally, she confronted him gently. "You seem distracted. Is something wrong?" Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "Just thinking about turning 40, I guess. Makes a man reflective." He laughed softly, but it was brittle, breaking at the edges. Laura reached for his hand. "You're surrounded by family who love you. That's all that matters, isn't it?" He squeezed her hand back but didn't answer. Evening arrived with the smell of garlic and butter filling the kitchen. Laura set the table with quiet precision, arranging the plates, smoothing the napkins. Emma lit the candles, her young face glowing in the flickering light. Daniel entered, freshly showered, wearing the shirt Laura had laid out for him. He kissed her cheek and whispered, "Thank you." For a fleeting moment, warmth returned, and Laura allowed herself to hope the unease was nothing more than nerves. But then, another vibration from his pocket. He pulled the phone out, glanced quickly at the screen, and slipped it back. His expression changed, just enough for Laura to notice. A mix of guilt and anticipation. Laura said nothing, but the silence grew sharp, cutting between them as they sat down to eat. Outside, the night settled heavy over the quiet neighborhood. The candles flickered, shadows swayed across the walls, and laughter, though present, sounded thinner than it should. Beneath it all, Laura felt the steady pulse of something hidden, something waiting to reveal itself. As Daniel raised his glass for a toast, his phone buzzed again, louder this time, vibrating against the wood of the table. Emma giggled at the interruption, but Laura's smile froze. Daniel hesitated, then silenced it without looking. His jaw clenched. His hand shook just enough for Laura to notice. She held his gaze, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "Who keeps calling you on your birthday?" Daniel didn't answer. He only forced another smile and lifted his glass higher. "To 40, he said, "and to everything still ahead." Laura clinked her glass against his, but in her chest she felt the cold certainty that the night ahead would not be what she planned. The toast lingered in the air, glasses raised, candles flickering, but the silence afterward pressed harder than the clink of crystal. Laura's question, sharp, deceptively gentle, still hung between them. Daniel forced laughter, tried to steer the conversation toward lighter ground, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted once more to the silent phone resting near his plate. Laura said nothing else. She simply smiled and passed the bread, but her silence was louder than any accusation. Dinner ended with Emma clearing the plates, humming softly, blissfully unaware of the tension thickening like smoke. Daniel excused himself, claiming he needed to take a quick shower before cake. Instead, he slipped into his study, shutting the door a little too fast. Inside, with blinds half drawn, Daniel leaned against the desk, pulling the phone from his pocket. His thumb hovered over the screen, the missed calls stacked one after another. He swallowed hard, pressed the return call, and whispered as soon as the line connected, "Elena, you can't keep calling me like this." Her voice came quick, urgent, threaded with hurt. "It's your birthday. Did you think I'd just stay silent? You promised you'd make time for me today." Daniel's free hand raked through his hair. He lowered his voice, desperate not to be overheard. "I told you, it's family night. Laura's suspicious already. If you keep pushing—" "I don't care about Laura," Elena interrupted, her tone sharp, wounded pride seeping through. "I've been patient for years, Daniel. Tonight I'm coming over. I want to see you, if only for 5 minutes." Daniel froze. His heart pounded against his ribs. "You can't. Not tonight." But her silence on the other end carried its own threat. When she finally spoke, her words were soft but unyielding. 5 minutes, Daniel. You owe me that much." He closed his eyes, pressing fingers to his temple. Wanted to argue, but the familiar guilt weighed too heavy. Before he could respond, she hung up. Daniel stood there, the phone still pressed to his ear long after the line went dead. His reflection in the darkened window stared back. Aged, tired, cornered. He had built his life on careful balance, lies layered like fragile glass. Now, it all trembled with a single knock waiting to happen. He stayed in the study longer than he meant to. When he finally emerged, Laura was in the kitchen cutting the cake. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "You missed Emma lighting the candles," she said quietly. Daniel smiled too quickly. "Sorry. Got caught up in something." Laura studied him, her knife pausing mid-slice. She didn't press further, but he felt her eyes following him as he leaned down to kiss Emma's cheek. The celebration continued, but Daniel barely tasted the cake. Every vibration of his phone made his pulse spike. Twice, he silenced it before Laura could notice. Once, he nearly dropped his fork when Eleanor's name flashed across the screen. Laura pretended not to see, but her posture changed. She poured herself more wine, her smile more brittle now, her gaze sharper. She laughed at Emma's jokes, but Daniel could feel the weight of her attention pressing into him. Inside, his panic grew. He knew Elena's temper, knew her pride. If she truly meant to come, there was little he could do to stop her. He imagined the doorbell ringing, Laura opening it, her smile turning to stone as two worlds collided. After cake, Emma excused herself to finish homework. Laura gathered the plates, humming softly, but Daniel could sense the storm beneath her calm. He slipped his phone into his pocket and muttered, "I'm just stepping outside for some air." In the cool night, he dialed Elena again. This time she answered on the first ring. "Eleanor, please. Don't come here, I'm begging you." Her voice was low, deliberate. "I'm already on my way, Daniel." The line went dead once more. Daniel gripped the railing of the porch, his breath coming fast. His hands trembled, the reality sinking in. Elena was truly coming, and nothing he said would stop her. From the kitchen window, Laura watched him. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the desperation in his posture, the way he paced like a man waiting for judgment. Her unease sharpened into a certainty she had long feared, but never voiced. She turned back to the sink, her face calm, her mind racing. If another woman was bold enough to call her husband on his birthday, bold enough to intrude on their home, then tonight would reveal the truth. Laura dried her hands slowly, deliberately. She would not ask more questions. She would wait. Inside, Daniel rejoined her, forcing another smile. He tried to make conversation, tried to smooth the edges of his guilt, but the mask slipped too easily now. His laugh was hollow, his touch distracted. Laura poured him another glass of wine and said nothing. Her silence had shifted, no longer suspicion, but preparation. And as the night grew deeper, Daniel's phone buzzed once more. This time, he didn't even bother silencing it. He just stared at the screen, frozen, while Laura watched in silence. The inevitability had arrived. Soon, a knock at the door would change everything. The phone's glow dimmed again, but the damage was already done. Daniel's silence, his stiff posture, the way his eyes lingered on the screen, none of it escaped Laura. She said nothing, yet her mind was busy, pulling threads, weaving a picture she didn't want to see. Dinner stretched on, but it no longer felt like celebration. The table was set beautifully. Candles, polished silverware, plates steaming with Laura's careful cooking. Still, the air carried something brittle, like glass ready to fracture under the slightest pressure. Daniel smiled when Emma passed him the salad bowl, but his attention kept slipping away, his gaze flicking toward the phone resting beside his plate. The screen remained dark, but Laura knew he was waiting for it to light again. That anticipation painted itself on his face with every distracted glance. Emma, oblivious, chattered happily about school projects and a new book she was reading. Her laughter filled the spaces that should have been warmed by family conversation. Instead, it only highlighted the silence between her parents. "Dad," Emma said suddenly, her voice light, teasing, "are you hiding something? You keep staring at your phone like it's your secret girlfriend." Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. He forced a laugh, too loud, too quick. "Just work, sweetheart. Always someone sending me an email." Laura's hand tightened around her glass. She smiled faintly, her eyes fixed on him. "Work on your birthday night?" Daniel shifted in his chair. "Deadlines don't stop for birthdays." Emma shrugged, unfazed. "Still, you look nervous, like you're waiting for bad news." Her innocence cut sharper than accusation. Daniel reached across the table, patting her hand. "No bad news. Just distractions." But Laura watched the way his hand trembled before he pulled it back. The candles flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. The atmosphere thickened, heavy and suffocating. Every word, every pause, seemed to scrape against something fragile. Laura broke the silence, her tone soft but edged. "Do you remember last year's birthday, Daniel? You said the only gift you wanted was time together, without interruptions." He hesitated, eyes dropping to his plate. "I remember." "Funny," she continued, her voice steady. "How quickly things change." The words hung in the air. Daniel didn't answer. Emma looked between them, sensing something beneath the surface she couldn't name. Dinner moved forward, though no one seemed hungry anymore. Laura pushed food around her plate, watching Daniel more than eating. His laugh, when it came, was hollow. His stories about work sounded rehearsed, too clean, too polished. She had lived with him long enough to know the difference between truth and performance. Every time the phone buzzed faintly, even in silent mode, Daniel stiffened. Once he reached for it instinctively, then caught himself, leaving it face down on the table. Laura noticed. She noticed everything. Emma, trying to ease the strange mood, leaned forward. "So, Dad, did anyone special call you today? Like old friends?" Daniel blinked. "Friends? Yes, of course." Emma tilted her head. "Anyone Mum doesn't know?" The question was playful, but the silence that followed made the air grow colder. Laura's gaze sharpened, pinning Daniel in place. He chuckled awkwardly. "Just colleagues. Nothing secret." Laura raised her glass, her smile thin. "Secrets have a way of showing themselves, don't they?" Daniel looked at her, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. The meal ended with plates half finished. Emma excused herself again, muttering about homework, though her eyes lingered on her parents with faint worry. When she was gone, the room fell into near silence, save for the faint ticking of the dinner, the cake, it's all perfect. Her reply was quiet, deliberate. "Perfection is fragile, Daniel. It doesn't take much to crack it." She met his gaze for a moment, then turned back to the sink. The weight of her words lingered between them. Daniel sat at the table, staring at his untouched cake. His phone buzzed again, this time longer, insistent. He didn't pick it up, but the sound itself was enough. Laura's shoulders stiffened, her hands pausing mid-wash. The knock on the door hadn't come yet, but both of them felt it drawing closer. Laura dried her hands slowly, her mind sharpening with grim certainty. Daniel shifted in his chair, sweat beading at his temple. Neither of them spoke, but both knew the evening was far from over, and just as the silence threatened to break, the sound they dreaded finally arrived, 3 sharp knocks against the front door. The sound of knuckles rapping against wood cut through the house like a blade. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate, unhurried, yet carrying the weight of inevitability. Laura froze by the sink, the dishcloth in her hands dripping water onto the floor. Daniel's head jerked toward the door, his face draining of color. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The candles on the table burned low, flames bending in the draft that followed the silence. Somewhere upstairs, Emma's music played faintly, oblivious to the storm gathering below. The knock came again, lighter this time, almost polite. Laura turned slowly, her eyes on Daniel. His lips parted, as though to explain, but no words came. She wiped her hands with deliberate care, set the cloth down, and walked toward the door. Daniel half rose from his chair. "Laura, wait." She didn't. When she opened the door, a chill gust entered with the visitor. Elena stood there, clutching a small gift bag wrapped in shiny paper. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile bright, but her eyes flickered nervously as they landed first on Laura, then over her shoulder toward Daniel. "Good evening," Elena said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to stop by and wish Daniel a happy birthday." Her words carried an innocence they didn't own. Laura studied her, letting the silence stretch. Then she stepped aside, her smile cool and measured. "Of course. Come in." Elena crossed the threshold cautiously, her heels clicking against the hardwood. The warmth of the house contrasted sharply with the frost between the women. Daniel pushed back from the table, rising quickly, his movements awkward. "Elena," he said, his voice strained. "You didn't have to—" "But I wanted to," she interrupted, handing him the bag.
A small gift.
Laura's eyes lingered on the exchange. She noticed the way Daniel avoided meeting her gaze, the way Elena's hat had lingered a fraction too long as he took the bag. "Such thoughtfulness," Laura murmured, her tone almost kind. "It's rare to find friends so devoted." Elena smiled, but her cheeks flushed. "Well, Daniel has always been there for me. I thought it was only right." Daniel's hands tightened around the bag. "Maybe we should sit for a minute. Have some coffee." They gathered in the living room, the candles flickering in the dining room behind them. Laura perched gracefully on the armchair, her posture poised, while Daniel and Elena sat uneasily on the couch, leaving a polite gap between them. Laura spoke first, her voice calm, deliberate. "So, Elena, how long have you and Daniel known each other?" Elena hesitated, glancing at Daniel. "A few years. Through work, mostly." "Work," Laura repeated, her eyes glinting. "Funny. He doesn't talk much about work at home. I suppose you must be a very special colleague." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Laura." She silenced him with a glance. Elena forced a laugh, too light, too brittle. "Nothing like that. Just friendship." But her eyes betrayed her. Laura caught it, the flicker of possession, the faint pride, the way her voice softened when she said his name. For the next half hour, conversation tiptoed along a razor's edge. Laura poured coffee, her movements precise, graceful, almost ceremonial. Daniel sipped nervously, avoiding both their eyes. Eleanor tried to fill the silence with harmless stories, but every word carried double meanings Laura refused to miss. At one point, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. "Who's here?" she called. Daniel shot up quickly. "Just a friend of mine, honey. Go finish your homework." Emma frowned, lingering for a moment, before disappearing again. The brief interruption only deepened the tension. When Laura returned to the couch, she set her cup down and leaned forward slightly. "Married, of course." Laura smiled thinly. "I'm glad we agree." The clock ticked steadily on the wall. The fire crackled faintly in the hearth, but no warmth touched the room. Daniel tried to speak, tried to bridge the gap, but his words stumbled, drowned beneath the unspoken war unfolding between the two women. Laura's thoughts hardened with every glance, every half-truth. She had always prided herself on patience, on dignity. But tonight, patience felt like humiliation. And humiliation was a weight she would not carry. She studied Elena, then Daniel, then back again. Their guilt radiated like heat, and it burned her far deeper than she had expected. Eventually, Elena stood, setting her cup aside. "I should go," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to stay long." Laura rose too, her voice smooth as silk. "It was lovely of you to stop by." Elena nodded, offering Daniel a final look that spoke volumes more than words. Then she slipped out the door, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and the heavy silence of exposed truths. Laura closed the door slowly, her hand lingering on the handle. She turned back toward Daniel, her smile gone now, her face unreadable. Daniel's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, desperate to explain, but Laura's calm gaze froze him in place. In that moment, she knew the truth without needing his confession. And in the quiet corners of her heart, a decision began to form. Cold, deliberate, inevitable. The candles had nearly burned down, wax dripping onto the tablecloth. Laura extinguished them one by one, each puff of smoke curling upward like a silent vow. The night was not over. The real confrontation had only just begun. The silence that followed Elena's arrival stretched across the dining room like an invisible net, binding the three of them together in a tension none dared cut with words. Laura's smile remained in place, a mask so carefully painted it could have belonged to porcelain. Daniel sat stiffly at the head of the table, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between the two women like a cornered animal searching for escape. Elena, on the other hand, smoothed the hem of her dress, forcing a composure that trembled at the edges. "Please sit," Laura said finally, her voice smooth as silk, but carrying an edge that only Daniel caught. She pulled out a chair, her eyes never leaving Elena's face. "It isn't every day my husband turns 40. We wouldn't want to be rude to a guest now, would we?" Daniel swallowed hard, but Elena obeyed, lowering herself into the chair opposite Laura. She placed the small gift box, a neat rectangle wrapped in silver paper, onto the table, her hand brushing against Daniel's sleeve in the process. The touch was fleeting, accidental perhaps, but Laura saw it. Of course she saw it. Wine filled the silence next. Laura reached for the bottle of Merlot, tilting it elegantly as she poured into 3 glasses. The crimson liquid rippled like blood under the dim light of the dining room. She slid 1 glass toward Elena, her eyes glittering. "To Daniel," Laura said, raising her own glass. "May his next decade be filled with honesty and clarity." Elena hesitated but raised her glass as well, murmuring, "To Daniel." Daniel's lips barely brushed his wine. He set the glass down quickly, fingers drumming against the table. "Maybe we shouldn't—" "Nonsense," Laura cut in, her tone still gracious. "Wine loosens the tongue, they say. Surely we could all use a little loosening tonight." The comment hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena took a sip, perhaps too quick. Cly, the flush of alcohol already rising in her cheeks. She laughed, brittle at first, then steadier as the wine dulled her restraint. "You've known Daniel long, haven't you?" Laura asked, her voice casual, though her eyes were sharp as knives. Elena glanced at Daniel, who stiffened, his fork clinking against his plate, though he hadn't eaten in several minutes. "A while," Elena replied carefully, fingers circling the rim of her glass. "A while," Laura echoed, refilling Elena's drink before she could protest. "Such an imprecise measure of time. Months? Years?" Elena shifted uncomfortably, the alcohol loosening her tongue faster than she'd anticipated. "It wasn't meant to last," she murmured, half to herself, then caught Laura's gaze and faltered. Daniel shot her a warning look, his eyes wide, but Laura's expression never wavered. She leaned forward slightly, the picture of polite curiosity. "Not meant to last," she repeated, voice low. "That sounds like more than a passing acquaintance." Elena laughed again, the sound edged with nerves. Well, sometimes life surprises you. People connect. Things continue." Laura's hand stilled on her wineglass. The tiniest flicker passed across her face, something between triumph and heartbreak. "Continue," she whispered. "Yes, that seems the right word." Emma's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs, a reminder of innocence untouched by the storm downstairs. The sound only deepened the bitterness curdling inside Laura. Elena, emboldened by another sip, added softly, "I didn't mean to intrude tonight. I just wanted to see him, to wish him well." The admission landed like a stone in water, rippling through the room. Laura sat back, her smile thinning but still present. She tapped her nails lightly against the table, a steady rhythm betraying the storm inside her. "You must be very fond of my husband," she said, each word deliberate. "Herpunkter." Daniel's voice broke in, desperate, almost pleading. "Laura, enough." But Laura raised her hand, silencing him. Her gaze never left Elena. "Fondness," she continued, "can be such a dangerous thing when it grows unchecked. Don't you agree?" Elena's flush deepened. She glanced at Daniel for rescue, but he was frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. For the first time all evening, Laura's mask slipped just for a heartbeat. Her eyes hardened, cold and calculating. She leaned closer, her voice soft but cutting. "You've told me more tonight than you realize." The room seemed to shrink with her words, air thinning until each breath felt like glass in their lungs. Daniel's pulse pounded visibly at his temple. Eleanor clutched her glass as though it might shield her. Then Laura sat back again, serene once more, and lifted her wine to her lips. "Well," she said lightly, as though nothing had passed between them, "shall we cut the cake?" Her smile returned, flawless and inscrutable, but her eyes burned with something that promised the night was far from over. The candles flickered as if in warning, shadows stretching long across the walls. The celebration had soured into something else entirely. A game Laura had decided to play, one she intended to win. And as the knife would soon slice into the cake, Laura's own blade of vengeance was already sharpening in silence. The front door closed with a soft click, but its echo thundered through the house. Elena's perfume lingered faintly in the air, clashing with the waxy sweetness of birthday candles that still smoked on the dining table. Laura stood motionless for a long moment, her hand resting on the back of a chair, her chest rising and falling in steady, controlled breaths. Daniel hovered in the doorway, shoulders slumped, his expression a knot of shame and dread. "Laura," he began, his voice tentative, "please, just listen." Her head turned slowly, and the look in her eyes froze him where he stood. "Listen?" she repeated, the word sharp, brittle. "I've been listening for years, Daniel. Listening to excuses, silences, half-truths. Tonight, I finally heard what you've been hiding." He stepped forward, palms raised as though approaching a wild animal. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. She wasn't supposed to come. I tried to stop her." Laura laughed, a sound with no warmth, only disbelief. "Stop her?" That wasn't the voice of a man trying to stop anything. That was the voice of someone who's been living two lives and hoping neither one collides. Well, congratulations. Tonight, they did. Her hand shot out suddenly, knocking his untouched wineglass from the table. It shattered across the hardwood floor, red liquid streaking like blood between the shards. The sound jolted the silence, a violent punctuation to years of swallowed resentment. Daniel flinched. "Laura, I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way." "Find out?" Her voice cracked, not from weakness but from the force of suppressed rage. "You think I didn't suspect? Do you really believe I'm that blind? Every late meeting, every shadow in your eyes when you came home, every time your phone lit up and you turned away, I saw it all. I chose silence. For Emma. For us." His throat worked, words failing him, before they even left his mouth. "It wasn't just lust," he muttered finally, shame clinging to every syllable. She listened to me. She made me feel—" The slap came quick, instinctive. Her palm connected with his cheek, the crack echoing louder than the shattering glass. His head jerked to the side, eyes wide with shock. "You dare!" Laura whispered, her voice trembling now, but with fury rather than fear. "You dare tell me about feelings when you've dismantled mine piece by piece, year after year." Daniel touched his cheek, his skin stinging under her hand. "I never stopped loving you." "Love?" Laura spat the word like poison. "Love doesn't sneak out to answer calls. Love doesn't bring its mistress into our home, to our table, on your birthday of all nights. Love doesn't make me play hostess while you sit there like a coward." Her voice rose, cracking under the weight of years unshed. "Do you know what it's like to carry this family while you drift away? To keep smiling for Emma, pretending everything is fine? I gave you my youth, my patience, my loyalty, and in return, you gave me her." Tears welled, blurring her vision, but she refused to let them fall. She seized the empty wine bottle and hurled it against the wall. It exploded into green fragments, the echo rumbling through the house like thunder. Daniel stumbled back, hands raised, his own eyes glistening. "Laura, please, please stop. You're scaring me." "Good," she hissed. "Be scared. Feel for once the weight I've been carrying alone. The tension between them was thick, suffocating. Laura's chest heaved, and Daniel's breath came shallow, the air sharp with the scent of spilled wine and broken glass. Finally, her fury broke into something quieter, but no less dangerous. Her voice dropped low, almost calm. "This isn't over, Daniel. Tonight is only the beginning. You've taken something from me that can never be repaired, and I won't forgive it." He swallowed hard, words failing him again. The silence pressed in, broken only by Emma's footsteps creaking faintly above them. Innocent, oblivious to the storm unraveling beneath her roof. Laura's gaze lifted briefly toward the ceiling, then back to Daniel, her expression hardening into resolve. "For her sake, I'll hold this house together. But don't mistake that for weakness. My silence is gone. My patience is dead. From here on, every word, every action, every breath of yours will be measured." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat tightened, strangling the apology before it could form. Laura bent down slowly, picking up a shard of glass from the floor. She turned it in her fingers, the edge catching the dim light, and then set it gently on the table between them. Her eyes never left his. "This is what you've made of us," she said softly. "Sharp, broken, and dangerous to touch." She turned away then, leaving him standing amid the wreckage of their evening, the shattered glass, the spilled wine, and the wreckage of their marriage. The house settled into silence once more, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before another storm. And upstairs, as Emma's laughter echoed faintly through her bedroom walls, Laura's mind was already stitching together her next move, each thread woven not from grief, but from something far colder. The air in the dining room still vibrated with the echoes of shattered glass. Laura stood stiff, her pulse hammering in her ears, her chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. Daniel's voice broke the silence, raw and pleading. "Laura, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can—" But the words only ignited her fury further. Fix it? After years of betrayal, after tonight's humiliation? Her eyes darted to the wine bottle she hadn't thrown. It sat on the table, half empty, the glass dark and heavy in the dim light. Her fingers moved before her mind could catch up, curling around its neck with a grip so tight her knuckles whitened. Daniel stepped closer, his hands raised in surrender. "Put it down. You don't want this." "I don't?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've already taken everything from me, Daniel. What else is left?" The bottle swung, a brutal, instinctive arc. It struck his temple with a sickening thud, the sound splitting the air sharper than any scream. Daniel staggered, eyes wide with shock, then collapsed onto the carpet. His body hit the floor hard, limbs folding awkwardly, as though he were nothing more than a discarded doll. Silence. Laura froze, the bottle still clenched in her hand, her breath catching in her throat. The world narrowed to the sight before her. Daniel's body sprawled across the floor, blood pooling slowly beneath his head, soaking into the fibers of the rug they had picked out together years ago. The bottle slipped from her grip, rolling onto the floor with a dull clink before settling near his outstretched arm. Her knees buckled, and she sank beside him. "Daniel?" Her voice cracked, desperate now, stripped of rage. "Daniel, get up." But there was no answer. His chest didn't rise, his eyes didn't blink. The only movement was the steady spread of crimson, creeping outward like a shadow swallowing the light. Laura lay, with trembling hands, staring at them as though they belonged to someone else. Blood stained her fingers, warm and sticky, its metallic scent sharp in her nostrils. She pressed a hand against his chest, hoping, praying for some sign of breath, of heartbeat, of life. Nothing. Her body shook violently, the weight of what she'd done pressing down until she thought it would crush her. "No, no, no, no." The words tumbled from her lips in a broken chant. Upstairs, the faint creak of Emma moving in her room pierced through Laura's panic. The world came rushing back in one suffocating wave, the house, the walls, the child who could never know this horror. Laura stumbled back, her heels slipping in the wetness on the carpet. Her hand clutched the table for balance, her nails digging into the wood. She wanted to scream, to release the storm that churned inside her, but fear bound her throat. Her gaze locked on Daniel's lifeless form. Just hours ago, he had raised a glass and toasted to 40, to the future. Now the future was gone, extinguished in an instant by her own hand. The realization hit her with merciless clarity. There was no going back. The line had been crossed, the act irreversible. She whispered, more to herself than to him, "I didn't mean to," but the words hung hollow in the air. Intent no longer mattered. The candles on the table burned low, wax dripping slowly, methodically, as if mocking her. The shadows lengthened across the walls, reaching toward her like accusing hands. Laura pressed her blood-stained palms against her face, sobs shaking her body. Yet beneath the grief, beneath the shock, something colder began to take shape. A voice inside whispered that survival now depended on control, on silence, on calculation. She drew a shuddering breath, her tear-streaked face lifting from her hands. Emma could not see this. The world could not see this. Laura's eyes had, ardent as they fixed once more on the body at her feet. She had crossed the line, yes, but now she would have to live on the other side of it. The silence after the blow was unbearable. Laura crouched on the blood-soaked carpet, her hands trembling as they pressed against Daniel's chest, willing it to rise, to prove that this wasn't final. But no breath came, no warmth stirred beneath her palm. Minutes passed like hours, and then the sharp tick of the kitchen clock broke through, each second hammering into her skull. Reality closed in around her. Daniel was dead, and she was the one who had done it. Her eyes darted frantically around the room. The wine bottle lay on its side, streaked red. Shards of earlier glass glistened like knives across the floor. The rug was ruined, saturated with a dark stain that spread wider by the minute. She lurched to her feet, her legs unsteady. Instinct told her to act, to fix, to erase. But every motion felt clumsy, pointless. She grabbed a towel from the counter, pressing it into the blood, but the crimson soaked through instantly, staining the fabric in grotesque blooms. She snatched another, then another, but the carpet swallowed them all. Her breathing grew ragged, shallow. She was losing control. Upstairs, the faint creak of footsteps froze her in place. Emma. Laura's heart thundered as the sound of the bedroom door opening whispered through the silence. "Mum?" Emma's sleepy voice drifted down the stairs, soft but terrifying. Laura whipped around, blood still streaking her hands. She shoved the towels behind her, her mind scrambling for a lie. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just dropped a glass." A pause. Then Emma's voice again, curious, suspicious. "Why does it sound like you're crying?" Laura wiped her face with the back of her wrist, smearing more crimson across her cheek. She forced a laugh that cracked under its own weight. "Just tired. Go back to bed, Emma." The staircase groaned as Emma descended one step, then another. Laura's pulse quickened. She positioned herself in front of Daniel's body, blocking the view from the hall. "Please," Laura whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop it. "Please don't come down." Emma hesitated. Then, mercifully, the steps retreated. A bedroom door clicked shut upstairs, though Laura knew it wouldn't hold forever. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed beside Daniel again, clutching the bloodied towels to her chest. The panic inside her tore at the seams of her sanity, threatening to split her apart. She could call the police, confess, tell them it was an accident. But as the thought formed, another rose with it. Emma. Her daughter's future. The shame, the judgment, the whispers that would follow them forever. "No," Laura muttered, shaking her head violently.
No one can know."
Her eyes fixed on Daniel's lifeless face, pale and still beneath the dim light. Once, she had loved him with every part of herself. Even through suspicion and betrayal, some part of her had clung to hope. Now, all that remained was this, his silence, and the ruin she had made. Laura reached for his hand, clutching it in both of hers, though it was already growing cold. Tears blurred her vision as she bent over him, her voice breaking into fragments.
"I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean... I just wanted you to hear me, to finally see me."
Her words dissolved into sobs, her body rocking gently as though she were cradling him in some twisted lullaby. She pressed her forehead to his chest, ignoring the wetness of the blood. The hours bled together. At moments, she thought she heard his voice, faint and distant, telling her it would be all right. At others, the silence was so loud it drove her near madness. Still, she made no call, no attempt to seek help. Her phone sat on the table, screen black, a lifeline she refused to touch. Instead, Laura stayed by Daniel's side, whispering broken apologies into the dark. Her hands shook, her lips trembled, but her resolve solidified. She would not let Emma's world collapse because of this. The night pressed heavy around her. Shadows deepened, and the last candle guttered out, leaving only the cold glow of the street lamp outside. Laura clutched Daniel's hand tighter, her tears drying into salt on her cheeks. The house was silent again, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a secret buried in the dark, one that would demand a cost greater than she could yet imagine. And upstairs, a door creaked once more. Emma, awake again, listening. The fragile cover of Laura's sin was already beginning to crack. Dawn crept into the house with merciless clarity. Pale light spilled through the blinds, illuminating the blood-stained carpet and the stiff form of Daniel lying where he had fallen. The night's shadows no longer concealed what Laura had done. Morning stripped away denial, leaving only the raw truth. Laura sat slumped beside him, her body stiff, her eyes hollow from sleeplessness. She hadn't moved for hours, save for the occasional tremor that rattled through her frame. Dried blood clung beneath her fingernails. Her once white blouse was mottled with dark stains. She had whispered apologies until her throat gave out, but now she was silent. Upstairs, Emma stirred. The soft thud of her footsteps made Laura's stomach clench. She had bought herself only one night of secrecy. In the daylight, Emma would see everything. There would be no excuse, no glass to blame, no shadows to hide behind. Laura staggered to her feet, pressing a bloodied towel over the worst of the stain. Futile. The fabric was soaked, her efforts pointless. Her hands shook as she shoved the evidence into a trash bag, but the mess was too big, too permanent. The house itself betrayed her. A sound outside made her freeze, the crunch of tires on gravel. A car pulling up. For a moment she dared to hope it was no one. But then came the sharp, too familiar knock at the door. "Eleanor," Laura whispered, horror flooding her veins. She peered through the curtain. There she was. Eleanor, dressed neatly, a small wrapped box in her hands. Her face carried forced brightness, but beneath it, worry flickered. Laura's breath caught. She couldn't open the door, couldn't face her. But fate gave her no choice. Another knock. Then a voice, low but insistent. "Daniel, are you home? I need to talk to you." The words were interrupted by the sudden wail of sirens in the distance. Laura's chest constricted as red and blue lights flared against the walls. 2 police cars stopped outside the house. Officers stepped out, their radios crackling. Eleanor turned toward them, confusion etched across her face. "Officers?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I was just checking on a friend." But the police weren't there for a wellness check. They had been called anonymously, by a neighbor who had heard the shouting, the smashing glass, and the silence that followed. Laura's world collapsed in seconds. The knock on her door was no longer Elena's, it was the police. The door opened, and the scene unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Officers swept inside, their expressions shifting from procedure to shock as they spotted Daniel's body on the floor. "Ma'am, step away!" one barked, his hand on his weapon. Laura raised her trembling hands, her knees giving way until she collapsed. Her voice cracked, hoarse from the night sobbing. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to." Emma's scream pierced the air from the staircase. She had come down at last, her young eyes seeing the full horror in daylight. Her father lifeless, her mother on the floor, hands raised in surrender. "Mum," Emma's voice shook, breaking with disbelief. "What did you do?" The words shattered what little strength Laura had left. She sobbed, her body folding in on itself as the officers pulled her gently to her feet and read her rights. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, her gift box slipping from her hands and landing with a dull thud on the porch. She stared at Daniel's body, her lips parted but no sound emerging. The house that once held birthdays, laughter, and ordinary dinners was now a crime scene. Evidence markers were placed, photographs taken. Every corner of Laura's life laid bare under fluorescent light and professional detachment. At the station, under harsh lighting and the steady click of a recording device, Laura finally spoke. Not just of the crime, but of everything that had come before it. Years of silence, of betrayal, of wounds that never healed. She spoke of love curdling into suspicion, of patience dissolving into rage. Her confession wasn't calculated. It poured out raw, unrestrained, as though her entire life had been building to this release. "I was invisible," she whispered, her voice shaking. "For years, I screamed in silence. Last night, I just wanted him to hear me. For once, to feel my pain. And now, there's nothing left." The detective across from her said nothing. His pen scratched across the paper, recording facts, stripping emotion down to evidence. When it was done, Laura was led to a holding cell. The door clanged shut, metal against metal, final and cold. She sat on the hard bench, her blood-stained hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on nothing. Outside, the sun climbed higher, indifferent to the ruins of a family, to the woman broken by love and betrayal, to the man whose silence would never break again. In the quiet, Laura whispered one last time, though no one listened. "I'm sorry." It hung in the air, fragile and empty, a final echo of a life that had ended in blood.